The day billionaire Jonathan Kingsley died, his family gathered in silence, dressed in grief and ambition. The master bedroom of the Kingsley estate had become a stage. Doctors whispered, lawyers waited, and outside, the press buzzed, oblivious to the real story that was about to unfold inside. But no one noticed her. The black woman sitting quietly in the corner. Not a maid. She simply said, an old friend. Jonathan didn't correct her. Not because she was wrong, but because he knew the war her truth would unleash. Before he passed, he made her promise two things. Stay for the reading of the will, and make them see her. Really see her. She promised. But what Olivia didn't know then was how far the Kingsley family would go to erase her. Or how deep she'd have to dig, not just into the estate, but into the legacy of silence she had married into. Because love may have brought them together, but only truth could set her free. And that truth begins with a meeting in Manhattan, 12 years earlier. Love didn't announce itself with fireworks or grand gestures. For Jonathan Kingsley, it came in the form of quiet confidence, wrapped in a tailored navy dress. Holding a clipboard and commanding a room full of billionaires with calm authority, he met Olivia Grace at a fundraising gala for the New Orleans Children's Medical Center. She wasn't impressed by his name, his donations, or his tailored tux. She was focused, sharp, and professional, and she didn't pretend not to know who he was. That intrigued him more than anything. She was the event coordinator. He was the major donor. Their first conversation had been about logistics and guest flow, but it ended with a question that changed everything. "Would you have dinner with me tomorrow night?" he asked, surprising even himself. Olivia blinked. "I'm sorry. Dinner," he repeated. "Just one. If it's terrible, you never have to see me again." It wasn't terrible. It was electric. That one dinner led to breakfast the next morning, lunch the next day, and within a month, they were inseparable. Jonathan, a man who built walls around his heart with stock options and executive meetings, had let someone in, and Olivia didn't come crashing through the gates. She walked in like she belonged there. They laughed. They fought. They challenged each other. She didn't care about his wealth. She cared about his integrity. And that terrified him, because the last time he loved someone like that, his family destroyed it. Jonathan told her the truth late one night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. "My family comes from old Southern money. They believe in legacy, tradition, control. When I was 20, I fell in love with someone they didn't approve of. When I refused to end it, my father threatened to disown me. I caved. I never forgave myself. So what are you saying now?" Olivia asked. "That they wouldn't approve of me either?" He turned to her. "They wouldn't approve of anyone who doesn't fit their blueprint. But yes, being black, independent, and unapologetically yourself, you'd scare them. And I love that about you." She sat in silence, the air between them thick with history neither of them lived but both understood. Finally she spoke. "So what are you going to do about it?" He kissed her forehead. "I'm going to protect what we have, no matter what." 3 months later, he proposed with a simple emerald ring, her birthstone. No fanfare, just a beach, 2 witnesses, and a vow to keep their love sacred, private, away from the media, the family, the legacy. Olivia hesitated. "You want to hide me?" "No," he said. "I want to keep you safe. My family's capable of things you can't imagine. We build this quietly. 5 years. Then I tell the world, no matter what." She set her conditions. 5 years. Then full disclosure. No extensions. No excuses. Jonathan agreed. They bought a penthouse in the French Quarter registered to an LLC. a beach house and passed Christian under a trust. They lived like ghosts in his world, but were fully alive in their own. For 3 years it worked. He managed public life, boardrooms, shareholders. She built her event company from scratch. They created a rhythm of weekends together, weekday calls, and spontaneous escapes. No red carpets, no family holidays, but plenty of love. Then came the morning she whispered 2 words that changed everything. "I'm pregnant." Jonathan froze, then smiled like a boy at Christmas. "We're having a baby?" She nodded, eyes wide, vulnerable. "Yes." He pulled her into his arms. "This changes everything." And it did. They turned the beach house into their sanctuary. He planted trees in the backyard, built a nursery, installed cameras and gates. He said, "We can raise her here, off the radar, at least until the 5 years are up." But Olivia saw the truth. "We're not raising a child in hiding. It's just a delay." He said, "The merger, my father's health. 1 more year." 1 year turned into 2. Jonathan missed milestones. First steps. First words. First birthday. Olivia recorded everything. Sent videos. Wrote letters. But none of it replaced presence. By year 5, she was done waiting. "We had a deal," she told him one night. "You said 5 years. That was your word." Jonathan looked tired. Tired of hiding. Tired of his double life. 3 more months. I promise. The merger's almost done. Then we go public." She looked him in the eye. "No more delays." He nodded. "No more." But fate had other plans. 3 weeks later, he collapsed during a board meeting. The diagnosis, stage 3 pancreatic cancer. Suddenly, everything they built in private was on the brink of destruction. And time, the one thing they kept bargaining with, was running out. He called Olivia from the hospital. "Come to me. Bring our daughter. I need to hold you both." She hesitated. Going to him meant entering the lion's den, the family mansion, the place where no one knew she existed. But love, real love, doesn't hide when things get hard. It shows up. She packed bags, buckled their daughter into the car seat, and drove toward a war she never asked for. A war she never wanted, but one she would fight with every piece of her heart. Because no one knew she was his wife. But they were about to find out. Jonathan Kingsley had always been a man of power. His words moved markets. His decisions changed lives. But the one decision he couldn't make was the one that mattered most. They had agreed on 5 years. 5 years of secrecy. 5 years to build something sacred, something theirs. Olivia had believed him when he'd held her hand in the Caribbean sun and said, "After that, I'll tell them. I promise." And for a time, it was enough. They built a life in the shadows, a penthouse in Baton Rouge registered under an anonymous LLC, a beach house in Port Aransas known only to them. On paper, they were strangers. But behind those closed doors, they were more than a couple. They were a family. Their daughter, Soraya, came into the world on a stormy April morning, her first cries drowned by thunder and Olivia's silent tears. Jonathan had held her like a miracle, whispering promises he would never make out loud in any boardroom. "You are the best thing I've ever done," he told his daughter, "and I'll never let anyone make you feel like you don't belong." But time, like secrets, does not stay still. The 5-year mark crept closer, and Olivia, who had given up visibility status, even her own family for this life, began to count down the days with quiet dread. When she reminded Jonathan of the deadline, he didn't argue. He kissed her, said, "Of course," and scheduled a beach trip to celebrate. But the beach trip never happened. Instead, Jonathan called late one night, breathless from a board meeting gone too long, his voice strained. "My father's had another stroke," he said, "and the merger's at risk. If this falls apart now, everything goes down with it." "So do we," Olivia said quietly. "Don't forget that." "I'm doing this for you, for us," he replied, a line she'd heard too many times. But this time, she didn't push. She hung up, looked at the sleeping Soraya beside her, and wondered how long a heart could survive in the dark. Weeks became months. Jonathan came home less. His calls were shorter. His eyes carried shadows. When he did visit, he was kind, loving. He brought gifts. He listened. But Olivia could feel it, that slow erosion of courage. The man who had once told her he'd build a new world for them was now too afraid to open the door. She began to write letters to Soraya, sealed envelopes filled with the truths Jonathan was too afraid to say. "Your father loves you," one letter read, "but love is not always brave. One day, you'll understand why I had to be both mother and mirror." Then came their 5th anniversary. No flowers. No phone call. Nothing. Olivia sat on the back deck of their beach house, a glass of untouched wine in her hand, and listened to the waves crash against the rocks. Soraya was asleep, clutching the stuffed bear Jonathan had given her on her 2nd birthday. When the phone rang past midnight, she didn't answer. She knew it was him. The next morning, she listened to the voicemail. He was sorry. The board had called an emergency vote. His father was lucid again, for the first time in weeks, and demanding Jonathan's presence. There was no time, no space, no excuse good enough. But she didn't cry. Instead, she went inside and began packing a small bag, not to leave, but to prepare, because she knew something was breaking. Not their love, but their agreement. When he came the next day, disheveled, exhausted, eyes rimmed with red, she let him in. "I missed everything, didn't I?" he said. She didn't answer. He knelt beside her chair, took her hands in his. "I'm losing it, Liv. The merger's slipping through my fingers. My father, he's not going to make it. And my brother Harold's circling like a vulture. If he finds out about you and Soraya now, they'll destroy everything." "And what about us?" she whispered. "What happens when they destroy us? I just need more time." "How much?" she asked. "Another year? 2? Until you're standing over your father's grave. And even then still afraid?" He stood, ran his hands through his hair, the way he always did when cornered. 3 months, he said finally. "Give me 3 more months. The deal will close. I'll step back. We'll tell them together. I'll call a press conference if I have to." She studied him, her face unreadable. "You've said that before. I've never meant it more than now." She nodded. 3 months. But if you're not ready, I'll be the one to tell them. With or without you," he promised. Again, for a little while, things were different. He stayed longer. He laughed more. He taught Soraya how to fly a kite on the beach. Olivia, against all instincts, began to believe again. But when 3 months passed, the only thing that came was another excuse. The merger fell into chaos. His father slipped in and out of coherence. The family doubled down, calling secret meetings, preparing legal contingencies. Jonathan panicked. "They've started following me," he told Olivia one night. "Harold hired someone. I had to take the long way here, change cars." "You're living like a fugitive," she said. "And you're dragging us with you. You don't understand. If they find out before I can secure the deal, they'll challenge everything. They'll bury us in lawsuits. They'll erase you. They already have, she replied, her voice hollow. I've lived 8 years invisible. You've given them everything. What have you given me? He didn't answer. That night, she slept on the couch. He slept in Soraya's room, holding her like an anchor. The next morning, he left before dawn. She stared at the empty side of the bed and realized something had shifted. Not in him, in her. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even surprised. She was simply done waiting. 2 weeks later, Jonathan called from the city. I need to see you, he said. I'll come tonight. It was rare for him to arrive unannounced midweek. When he did, Olivia knew something was wrong. His hands were shaking. His color was off. I went to the doctor, he said. I thought it was stress. And? She asked, already knowing. Pancreatic cancer. He whispered, Stage 3, maybe 4. They're still running tests. Time froze. She sat, her mind racing through appointments, treatments, second opinions. But beneath the planning was something deeper, betrayal. He had run out the clock. Now, the truth wouldn't come from him. It would come from absence, from grief, from legal paperwork. He saw it in her eyes. I'm sorry, he said. I wanted to do it right. I swear I did. But promises are soft things in the face of death. I want you there, he continued. For the treatments, the appointments, I want you to be part of it. She nodded. Not for him. For Soraya. They drove back to the city together the next morning. She sat beside him in the doctor's office. Watched the light drain from his face as the oncologist explained the prognosis. She held his hair back when he vomited in the bathroom after his first chemo session. She fed him broth, massaged his back, and explained to their daughter that Daddy was just very tired. And then he did something unexpected. He called his lawyer. He updated his will. He drafted letters. He wrote a video message. And Olivia began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, he was finally ready to tell the truth. But illness is cruel. It doesn't wait for closure. It doesn't honor deadlines. It doesn't respect promises. Within a month, Jonathan couldn't walk without help. He was too weak to stand in front of a camera, too tired to return to the beach house, too scared to face the fallout. One evening, as Olivia helped him into bed, he grabbed her wrist. If I don't make it, don't let them erase you. Or her. She wanted to say he would make it, that the treatments were working, that it was just a phase. But Olivia Grace didn't lie. So she promised. And when he finally closed his eyes that night, she stayed beside him, holding his hand, watching his chest rise and fall. Slower and slower, knowing that when it stopped, the war would begin. Not for love, for recognition, for truth, and for the right to say, I was here. We were real. And we mattered. In the weeks that followed Jonathan's diagnosis, time became a blur. Chemotherapy, radiation, specialist consultations, supplements, hope wrapped in white lab coats, and heartbreak disguised as clinical optimism. Olivia was everywhere, driver, caretaker, partner, parent. By day, she balanced meetings with oncologists and managed her own business from a laptop on hospital chairs. By night, she held her husband through the tremors and the vomiting, cleaned sweat-soaked sheets, and whispered calm into the sleepless dark. She never told him how afraid she was, how every time she left the room and heard silence, her heart stopped, how Soraya had started drawing pictures with only 2 people in them, Mommy and me. And still, through it all, Jonathan never told his family. Not officially. Not publicly. Not in any way that mattered. They knew he was sick. That much was impossible to hide. But as he declined, the Kingsleys closed ranks, hosting private dinners in the mansion, discussing succession behind thick doors, managing press releases with polished PR agents. Jonathan was dying, and they were positioning for power. The truth about Olivia and Soraya? Still locked away in letters, in a lawyer's office, in the cowardice of a man torn between legacy and love. And yet he tried. There were moments. On one unusually good day, Olivia found Jonathan sitting upright, sorting through old photos. She walked in and froze. He was holding a picture of Soraya's first birthday, one that had never been printed, never shown to anyone. Just them. Just joy. "She looks like me," he said quietly. "But when she's angry, she's all you." Olivia smiled. "She has your eyes." He stared at the photo for a long time. "I want them to know her." "Not for me. For her." "Then tell them," Olivia said. "We're still here." "I'm scared," he confessed. "Not of them. Of what they'll do to you when I'm gone. You don't get to protect us by hiding us." She replied, "You're not shielding us, Jonathan. You're erasing us." He nodded slowly. "Then let's stop hiding." That night, he called his brother Harold, but the conversation never happened. The next morning, Jonathan collapsed in the bathroom. His organs were failing. His body was done waiting for him to find courage. They rushed him to the hospital. And for the first time in their 8-year marriage, Olivia had to explain to the receptionist why she wasn't listed on any of the paperwork. "I'm his wife," she said. "We've been married for 8 years. Our daughter is 4. I need to see him." The nurse blinked. "There's no Olivia Kingsley on his emergency contact list." She held up her phone. The marriage certificate. The birth certificate. Soraya's baby photos with Jonathan in every frame. Security hesitated, then let her through. But the humiliation never left her skin. It stayed with her through the hallways of that sterile place, through the glares of staff who didn't understand, through the family members who began arriving one by one and walked right past her, as if she didn't exist, because in their world she never had. When the doctor said he was stable enough to move back to the estate, the family insisted it happen immediately. "He should be surrounded by his own," Harold said. "He'll be more comfortable at home." And so they transported him back to the Kingsley mansion. A wing of the house transformed into a hospital suite. Monitors, machines, nurses on 24-hour shifts. Soft piano music piped into the room. Olivia and Soraya were not invited. Not formally. But Jonathan called Olivia the night he arrived. "I want to see you," he whispered. "I want to see both of you." So she packed an overnight bag, dressed Soraya in her Sunday best, and drove to the mansion. The gates opened without question. Perhaps he'd warned someone. Or maybe the staff had learned enough not to stand between a dying man and the people he needed most. They were led through halls lined with oil portraits and family crests. Legacies in frame. None of them hers. None of them Soraya's. At the door, the nurse paused. "He's resting." But a voice rasped from inside. "Let them in. Please." And in that dim room filled with shadows and unspoken words, Jonathan reached out and held his daughter one last time. "My princess," he whispered, "I've missed you so much." Soraya crawled onto the bed without fear, clutching her drawing. "I made you a rainbow, Daddy." He laughed weakly. "It's perfect." They spent an hour together, Olivia watching, memorizing every smile, every flicker of his hand on their daughter's hair, every glance that said, "I'm sorry," even when he didn't speak. But peace never lasts. There was a knock. Harold stepped in, followed by their sister Evelyn and a man Olivia recognized, James Faulkner, the family attorney. The air shifted. "Jonathan," Harold said carefully. "James is here. He needs to go over some legal documents with you." Jonathan didn't answer right away. Then he looked at Olivia. "Stay." Harold stiffened. "This isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," Jonathan said. "Everything I've been too afraid to say needs to be said." There was silence, then confusion, then anger. Evelyn's face paled. "What are you talking about?" Jonathan looked toward James. "They need to know." James, ever the professional, opened a leather folder. "Your brother has asked me to confirm something on the record. He said it will be part of the official reading of the will, but he would like to state it personally as well." Jonathan squeezed Olivia's hand. "This is my wife," he said. "Olivia Grace Kingsley." "And this," he nodded to the little girl curled beside him, "is our daughter, Soraya." Evelyn gasped. Harold took a step back. "That's impossible," Evelyn hissed. "You're not married." "For 8 years," Jonathan said. "We kept it private. That was my mistake. But it was real. It is real." Harold turned to the lawyer. "You knew about this?" James nodded. "Mr. Kingsley updated his will 6 months ago. I've reviewed and validated all relevant documents. Marriage license, birth certificate, trust agreements. This is absurd," Evelyn said. "She could be anyone. This could be a scam." "I know it's a lot," Jonathan said, his voice thinner now. "But it's the truth, and I won't leave this world pretending otherwise." They argued. Of course, they argued. But Olivia stayed silent, her hand never leaving Jonathan's. It wasn't her battle, not in that moment. It was his. And for once, he chose her. When the shouting escalated, the nurse returned. "He needs rest. Please, everyone out." Jonathan clutched Olivia's wrist. "Stay. Please don't leave me alone with him." And she stayed. All night. She sang lullabies to Soraya. Wiped Jonathan's forehead when the fever broke. Held his hand when the tremors returned. Outside, the family regrouped. A storm was brewing. Not in the skies, but in the walls of the Kingsley estate. A battle for legacy, for control, for the right to write the final chapter of a man they had never truly known. The next morning, James returned with more documents. Quietly, respectfully. "I need to prepare you," he told Olivia. She nodded. "They'll fight you," he said. "Everything is legal. Everything is airtight. But that won't stop them from trying to destroy your reputation. Your history, your daughter's inheritance." She didn't flinch. "I've lived this fight for 8 years," she said. "I just never called it a fight until now. You're not alone." James replied, the weight of it heavier than it should have been. In the hallway, Evelyn was on the phone, whispering fiercely to someone about court injunctions and emergency guardianship claims. Harold paced near the stairwell, clearly agitated. The lines had been drawn. There would be no quiet goodbye, only war. That night, as Jonathan drifted in and out of consciousness, Olivia sat beside him and read aloud one of Soraya's books. A children's story about the moon chasing the sun, about how even when apart, they shared the same sky. He smiled weakly. "Thank you," he whispered, "for waiting." "I didn't wait," she replied. "I built something while you hesitated." He looked at her, tears in his eyes. "I'm sorry." "I know. I just wanted to keep you safe. And now I want you to be seen." It was a bright, clear morning, the kind that mocked grief by daring to be beautiful. Inside Kingsley and Pierce legal chambers, the air was thick with tension. The boardroom was polished to perfection. Silver coffee urns steamed in the corners. Not a single chair creaked, but the silence said everything. They were all there. Harold, Evelyn, the other Kingsley siblings, cousins-in-laws, a scattering of family attorneys with guarded expressions. And at the head of the table, seated with quiet authority, was James Faulkner, Jonathan's longtime legal counsel and now the executor of his final wishes. And then came Olivia, poised, dressed in a sleek black dress. No diamonds, no flash, just quiet dignity. She entered the room with Soraya at her side, holding her tiny hand. The little girl wore a white ribbon in her curls and clutched a drawing in her other fist. A sun, a house, and two stick figures labeled Mommy and Daddy. The room froze. Every gaze followed them. Every glance a loaded bullet of judgment. But Olivia did not flinch. She took her seat at the table opposite Harold. Soraya sat beside her, humming softly to herself, unaware of the war humming under the surface. James stood. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice smooth but firm. "As executor of Jonathan Kingsley's estate, I will now proceed with the reading of his last will and testament, prepared and signed 6 months prior to his death, witnessed and verified under Louisiana law." There was a murmur. Evelyn folded her arms. Harold leaned forward, his face hard. "Let's get on with it." James didn't react. He opened the folder and began. The first pages were procedural. Revocation of prior wills. Declaration of sound mind. Designation of James as executor. Then the allocations began. "To Harold Kingsley, my brother," James read, "I leave the 1967 Mustang we rebuilt together as boys, and a cash gift of $250,000. Use it to do something we always talked about. Take a road trip. Learn to live." Harold's face remained unreadable. "To Evelyn, my sister," James continued, "I leave the Charleston Beach property and my grandmother's pearls. May they remind you of the woman you were before the name Kingsley became more important than kindness." Evelyn's lips thinned, but she said nothing. "To my cousins, David, Isabel, Charles, I leave individual cash gifts and full tuition scholarships for your children to be held in trust until they turn 18. No strings attached." There were nods around the table. Some relief, some confusion, but everyone knew what was coming. Everyone was waiting for the real bomb. James paused, glanced toward Olivia, then continued. "To my wife," he said, "Olivia Grace Kingsley, I leave the entirety of my personal estate, including, but not limited to, our home in Baton Rouge, the Port Aransas property, all art holdings, bank accounts, intellectual properties, vehicles, and any assets not explicitly named elsewhere. These were built with her, for her, and belong to her." A stunned silence dropped over the room like a lead weight, and then gasps, murmurs. "No," Evelyn hissed. "This has to be a mistake." James raised a hand. "There's more. To my daughter," he continued, "Soraya Grace Kingsley, I leave my 42% voting shares in Kingsley Enterprises to be held in trust until her 25th birthday. Until then, the voting power will be exercised by her mother, Olivia Grace Kingsley, whom I trust to act in her best interest, and the company's." "That did it." Harold stood. "This is outrageous," he shouted. "She's not even. This woman, no one even knew she existed until he was already on death's doorstep." James remained calm. "All documents are properly filed and verified. Marriage license, birth certificate, notarized will. Mr. Kingsley confirmed everything before a physician and psychologist, both of whom cleared him mentally fit. You may contest it, but it will be a waste of time and resources. Everything is airtight. She manipulated him. Evelyn snapped, eyes burning toward Olivia. He was weak, sick. She preyed on him. She loved him. James replied, for 8 years, quietly, without asking for a single dollar. I've seen the records. She never once withdrew from his corporate accounts. Never asked for shares. He chose this. Harold's attorney leaned in to whisper something, but the storm was already rolling. You think we'll let her control the company? Harold barked. She doesn't know a thing about this business. No, Olivia said, speaking for the first time. But I know how to protect what my husband built. And I know how to raise our daughter with the values he wanted her to have: integrity, compassion, and the courage to stand when standing is hard. All eyes turned to her. There was steel in her voice, but not anger, not revenge, just certainty. I didn't ask for control, she added. I don't want to run Kingsley Enterprises, but I will not let you take what Jonathan left for his daughter. And I will not allow you to rewrite our story just because it makes you uncomfortable. James cleared his throat. There is one final section, a personal statement from Jonathan. He asked that I read it now. He unfolded a separate letter. To my family, he had written, if you're hearing this, I'm gone. And you're probably furious. Maybe you feel betrayed. Maybe you feel blindsided. That's fair. But don't take that anger out on Olivia. She didn't hide anything. I did. There was an audible hush. Jonathan's words continued, his voice channeled through paper and truth. I made choices. I compartmentalized. I convinced myself that protecting you from Olivia and protecting Olivia from you was noble. It wasn't. It was fear. I feared your judgment more than I trusted your love. That was my failure, not hers. Evelyn looked away. Harold said nothing. James read on. You want to know who Olivia is? She's the woman who held my hand when I was weak, who never asked for my wealth, who built a life with me in the shadows because I begged her to. She's the mother of my child, my partner, my greatest truth. A pause. And Soraya? She's every good part of me. She's my second chance, my legacy. I don't care what color her skin is or how inconvenient her existence may be to your plans. She is mine, and you will respect her. There was silence again. No one dared breathe. Then the letter ended. If you love me, and I hope at least some of you still do, don't waste time fighting this. It's done. The lawyer has the documents. The trust is funded. The shares are protected. I did this carefully, deliberately, because for once, I wanted to do something right while I still could. James folded the letter. There was nothing left to say. No legal argument could undo what had just been laid bare. No courtroom could erase the clarity of Jonathan's voice, preserved in ink and resolve. Soraya looked up at Olivia. Was that Daddy's letter? Yes, baby, Olivia whispered. It was. She handed the drawing to James. Can you put this in the folder with the other papers? James took it gently. Of course. And then Olivia stood. We'll be going now, she said. I expect the transition will be unpleasant. But let me be clear. We're not going anywhere. Harold glared at her. You'll regret this. She met his eyes. No, she said softly. You will. And then she walked out, her daughter's hand in hers, their silhouettes casting long shadows across the polished marble as they stepped into the light. The cards had been reversed, the truth revealed, And whether the Kingsleys liked it or not, the legacy was no longer theirs alone. They thought it would be over after the reading of the will. They thought she'd take the money quietly, disappear into the shadows like a good secret. But they didn't know Olivia Grace Kingsley. And they underestimated what a mother will do when the future of her child is at stake. 3 days after the will was read, the lawsuits began to pile in like thunderheads. The Kingsley siblings, led by Harold, filed a formal challenge in civil court, citing mental incompetence, undue influence, and intentional concealment of material familial obligations. In simple terms, they were calling Jonathan a confused old man and Olivia a gold digger. It didn't matter that every medical evaluation proved his competence, or that every document had been legally notarized, or that the attorney who drafted the will had worked for the family for over 2 decades and had no vested interest in the outcome. They were Kingsleys, and Kingsleys didn't lose without blood. Olivia didn't flinch. She hired her own legal team, headed by civil rights attorney Naomi Barrett, a woman whose mere presence in a courtroom made defense lawyers sit straighter. Naomi reviewed the file and said one thing: "We're not just defending a will. We're exposing a pattern." She was right. The deeper they dug, the uglier the Kingsley family history became. There had been another woman. 30 years ago, a Latina college student named Mariella whom Jonathan had dated during his time at Tulane. She was bright, promising, ambitious. The family never officially acknowledged her. But she vanished from Jonathan's life just weeks before he suddenly volunteered to study abroad in London for a year. Naomi found the letters. Heartbreaking, apologetic, cowardly. They were written in the same voice Olivia had heard whispering to her in hospital beds. A man who loved deeply, but feared more. And he wasn't the only one. Naomi compiled testimonies from former family staff, secretaries, even distant cousins who had seen the inner workings of the dynasty, inheritance threats, manipulation, social pressure, and calculated silence, always deployed to maintain the purity and prestige of the Kingsley name. What Olivia had walked into wasn't just a fight over money. It was a fight over who gets to belong and who gets erased. The court hearings began quietly, behind closed doors, but the press caught wind within weeks. A beloved Southern philanthropist, a secret black wife, a multiracial heir to $1 billion stake in a legacy corporation. The headlines wrote themselves, and the public had opinions. Some rallied behind Olivia, cheering her grace, her courage, her refusal to back down. Others sided with the Kingsleys, claiming she was tarnishing a family name, or worse, playing the race card for a payday. But Olivia didn't answer interviews. She didn't go on talk shows. She didn't write open letters. She showed up to court every single day, dressed in black, hair tied back. Soraya's small drawing folded in her purse like a shield, and she listened to everything, to Harold calling her a distraction and manipulative, to Evelyn describing her marriage as a fantasy invented during Jonathan's decline, to their lawyer dissecting her character on the stand, her background, her mixed-race ancestry, her absence from country club registries, her refusal to change her last name legally despite having the license framed at home. And then Olivia spoke, calmly, clearly, not as a victim, not as a saint, but as a woman who had spent 8 years building a life behind the curtain of someone else's fear. "I was never Jonathan's secret," she said. "I was his choice. Every day. We loved each other. We fought, we built, we laughed, we cried. I raised his child. I held his hand as he died. And not once did I ever ask for his money. He gave it freely in the end, because he was finally brave enough to show the world who he really was. And who was he? The opposing counsel asked. A man who wanted to be better than the people who raised him. Olivia replied. And in his final act, he was. It was Naomi who delivered the final blow. The video. A 17-minute message recorded by Jonathan 1 year before his diagnosis, stored in a private drive. Delivered by a former assistant who had kept it safe in case something ever went wrong. In the video, Jonathan sat in his office, healthy, composed, direct. He looked into the camera and said, "I'm of sound mind. I know exactly what I'm doing. I've spent a decade hiding the people I love most. If you're watching this, I'm likely gone, and Olivia is standing alone. I want this to be proof, legal, emotional, spiritual, that she was never a mistake. She is my wife. Soraya is my daughter, and everything I have, I give to them, not out of guilt, but out of love. And if my family contests it, well, I suppose that tells you everything you need to know." The courtroom was silent. Even Harold looked shaken. Because whatever they had said about Olivia's motives, nothing could touch Jonathan's voice, his clarity, his sorrow, his truth. The judge called for recess. 2 days later, the Kingsleys withdrew their challenge. Publicly, they cited a desire to preserve family unity and avoid protracted litigation. Privately, they were advised they had no case, and that further pursuit might risk exposure of deeper family skeletons Naomi had only begun to hint at. But Olivia didn't celebrate. She didn't gloat. She took the ruling with grace, gathered her daughter's things, and left the courthouse with her head high. The legal battle was over. But the real war, reclaiming her daughter's rightful identity, their place in history, and the space Jonathan had left them, was just beginning. In the weeks that followed, Olivia was approached by business magazines, documentary producers, non-profit foundations asking her to speak about inheritance inequality, race, secrecy, and legacy. She declined almost all of them, except one. The Wall Street Post published a front-page feature titled, "The Woman the Kingsleys Didn't Count On." It didn't focus on money or betrayal. It focused on love. On how a child named Soraya sat quietly during court hearings, coloring in pages of her daddy with angel wings. On how Olivia had never asked for the empire, but inherited it anyway. Not by birthright, but by integrity. The article went viral. Social media exploded. Suddenly, the company board was under pressure not just legally, but socially. Investors asked questions. Customers threatened boycotts. And stockholders demanded accountability, which led to something no one expected. An olive branch from Harold. A quiet meeting request. No lawyers. No cameras. Just the two of them in a side room at the foundation Jonathan had once funded in secret, now rebranded the Kingsley Initiative for Equity and Opportunity, with Olivia as chair. "I was wrong," Harold said plainly. "You don't owe us anything. But Soraya, she deserves to know her family, even if we don't deserve her." Olivia studied him for a long time, and finally nodded. "Then start by meeting her like a person, not a threat." And he did, awkwardly at first. But honestly, one by one, the family began to show up. Not with apologies, not with retractions, but with effort. Elizabeth brought a box of Jonathan's childhood photos. Evelyn sent a letter. Even the cousins, who had never looked at Olivia during the trial, sent birthday gifts when Soraya turned 5. They weren't close. Not yet. But it was a beginning. A rebuilding. A family not born in tradition, but forged in truth. And when asked one day by a reporter, months after the court ruling, how she managed to endure the hatred, the scrutiny, the war, Olivia said only this: "I didn't endure it. I outlived it. Because sometimes justice doesn't look like punishment. Sometimes it looks like presence, like staying, like making sure the world knows your name, not for revenge, but for remembrance." And Olivia Kingsley had done just that. She hadn't just won a case. She'd rewritten a legacy, one court date at a time. There are some stories that begin in silence and end in truth. 1 year had passed since the reading of the will, since Olivia Grace Kingsley stood in a room full of people who never wanted to see her and made them look anyway. A year since she buried the man she loved. A year since she chose to stop being hidden. The Kingsley estate no longer loomed as it once had. Its manicured lawn still stretched. Its high hedges still whispered old money, but something was different now. The ghosts didn't haunt it anymore. The walls, once painted with unspoken rules and ancestral pride, had begun to echo with something new: laughter, questions, beginnings. Because this time, the next generation had a voice. Soraya, now 6, ran barefoot across the grass with her cousins. Her curls wild in the wind, her giggles untamed. She didn't know what her mother had endured to get her here. She didn't know the weight of lawsuits or whispered judgments. She didn't know she'd once been called a liability. All she knew was that she belonged. And for Olivia, that was everything. The Kingsleys had changed, not overnight. Not all at once, but change had come. Slowly, clumsily, but undeniably. Elizabeth started visiting weekly, bringing books and old family stories. She even gave Olivia a dusty journal from Jonathan's college days, filled with poetry he never shared, most of it written during the early months of their secret marriage. Harold took longer, but he came around in his own way. He'd never apologize aloud. Kingsley men didn't do that. But when he showed up at the Kingsley Initiative's annual fundraiser and matched Olivia's education grant with a surprise donation, she understood what he meant. That was the first night he ever called her Olivia. Not her. Not that woman. Just Olivia. And when he knelt beside Soraya at the event, helped her button her coat, and asked her to tell him about the stars she was painting in her notebook, Olivia felt something break open. Something old. Something ugly. And something healing right behind it. The Kingsley Initiative itself had become a symbol of restoration, of reckoning. Olivia had taken the foundation and reimagined it. Scholarships for underrepresented youth. Mentorship programs in law and business. A dedicated research wing exploring legacy, inheritance, and systemic exclusion. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about access. It was about rewriting who gets to sit at the table. People started asking Olivia to speak, not as a widow, not as a symbol, but as a leader. She was invited to conferences, boardrooms, university panels. Every time she spoke, she told the truth, not to glorify pain, but to give it a purpose. "I didn't ask for any of this," she told one audience. "But maybe that's the point. Most of us never asked to be part of history. We're just trying to survive. But if we're brave enough to stand, even when the world turns away, sometimes we become the chapter that changes everything." Back at the estate, changes continued. The portraits in the gallery had been updated. Among the stern oil paintings of past patriarchs, there now hung a new piece: Jonathan Kingsley. Not as a corporate titan, not as a stoic heir, but seated beside Olivia on the beach, Soraya in his lap, their faces lit with laughter. The painting was based on a photo Olivia had taken herself, on a timer, just seconds before Jonathan had kissed her temple and whispered, "This is all I need." That image, hung in the very hall where Olivia once felt invisible, spoke louder than any speech. It was a reminder, Not all legacies are built in boardrooms. Some are built in the quiet courage of choosing love over fear. The penthouse in the city was sold. Olivia moved into the smaller Kingsley cottage at the edge of the estate. She renovated it not into a monument of power, but into a home. Bright walls, open windows, shelves filled with books, plants, art made by Soraya. A garden where the family once planted status now bloomed with resilience. One morning, while Soraya painted in the sunroom, she looked up and asked, "Mommy, do you miss Daddy?" "Every day," Olivia replied. "But do you still feel sad?" Olivia paused. "I feel thankful. I feel proud. I feel strong. And yes, sometimes I still feel sad. But sadness doesn't mean we stop living. It just means we love deeply." Soraya thought for a moment. "Is that why he left us stars?" Olivia smiled, wiping a tear. "Yes, baby. That's why." At night, they still looked up at the sky. They still found the brightest star. And every time it twinkled, Soraya would say, "Daddy's winking." And maybe he was. Because in every step Olivia took, from courtroom to classroom, from silence to strength, Jonathan's love still echoed. Not perfectly, not painlessly, but honestly. He had died before he could fully undo the harm his silence caused. But in his final act, he had chosen truth. And truth, when protected fiercely, can become the seed of something beautiful. At the 1-year anniversary of his passing, Olivia organized a private gathering, no press, no speeches, just people who had loved him in different ways. People who now knew each other through the wounds he'd left behind, and through the courage of the woman he left standing. Emma brought a letter she found tucked inside one of Jonathan's books, written but never sent. It read, "I used to think legacy was about what we built. The companies, the homes, the name. But I was wrong. Legacy is the courage to love someone even when the world tells you not to. And the humility to say, I was afraid, but not anymore. If you ever read this, live. I hope you forgive me. And I hope you teach our daughter to be everything I was too scared to be: brave, loud, bold, and free." That letter now sits framed in Soraya's room, next to her night light, her space posters, and the stuffed bear Jonathan bought her on her 2nd birthday. And some nights, when the wind is soft and the stars are clear, Olivia reads it to her aloud, not because she wants Soraya to hold on to grief, but because she wants her to hold on to love. To know that her story didn't start in shadows. It started in resilience. It started with a promise. And it lives in every step she takes toward the light. Because in the end, this wasn't just a story about inheritance. It was a story about identity, about visibility, about who gets to be remembered, and who must fight to never be forgotten. Olivia had entered the Kingsley world as an outsider, a secret, an inconvenience. But she left it as something else entirely: a survivor, a leader, a mother who made sure her daughter would never grow up wondering if she was enough, and a woman who turned a legacy built on silence into a new chapter built on truth. So when people asked, "How did you do it?" she said, "I didn't destroy the Kingsleys. I reminded them who they could be if they were willing to change. And when they asked if she would ever forget what they'd put her through, she answered, 'No, but I'm choosing to forgive. Not for them, for her.' Because in the end, the greatest power is not what you inherit. It's what you choose to pass on. And Olivia Grace Kingsley, she passed on strength. She passed on love. And she passed on a name no one would ever be able to erase again. In a world obsessed with appearances, the story of Olivia Grace Kingsley reminds us that truth, no matter how inconvenient, is the only legacy worth leaving behind. For years, Olivia lived in the shadow of a man who loved her deeply, but feared the weight of his family's judgment more than the cost of silence. She raised their daughter, built a life in the margins, and watched from a distance as his name was praised while hers remained unspoken. But when death forced the truth to surface, Olivia didn't run. She stood, alone, doubted, and disrespected, and demanded to be seen. And in doing so, she didn't just fight for an inheritance. She fought for identity, dignity, and a place in the narrative her husband once feared to write. The lesson is simple but profound. Love that is hidden out of fear will always leave wounds behind. But truth, when spoken with courage, has the power to not only heal but transform. Olivia's strength reminds us that our value isn't defined by whether others accept us. It's proven by whether we accept ourselves, even when doing so means standing alone. Because justice doesn't begin in court, it begins the moment we decide we deserve to be seen. If someone you love kept you a secret to protect their image, would you stay silent or speak up to claim your place, even if it meant facing their entire family alone? What would you do and why? Let us know in the comments and share your thoughts.